Here we go, and we're live. We won't go live and direct just yet, but we can wait here. Remy, did you get your coffee ready for the next hour or 45 minutes?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Remy was about to fall asleep dreaming of golf.
I can see a lot of familiar name in the attendees list here now. Hey Brett, hey Marco, how are you?
Yeah, I'll have to leave you to do the chat. I'm not very good with the chat and the polls and things like this.
Yeah, it's not Norwegians are known to be ice cold and not very kind of small talk friendly, but I've worked with Americans for a long enough time to understand that it's invaluable. You just have to master it.
Yeah, nice. We'll wait.
So
we'll wait 2 more minutes or so.
There we are.
People joining. For those that are joining, we will have a poll at some stage we'll put live a little bit later, just when more people come on, and then we'll have the answers to that towards the end as well. And if you have to drop off at any stage, everything will be shared afterwards, but don't drop off at any stage. This is going to be great. We keep all the swear words in. I can't believe it's snowing where Remy is. It looks so warm.
It looks very warm, and it is. It's 24 degrees here, Celsius. But outside it's closer to 4 degrees Celsius. So yeah.
Make it till you make it. I say.
Yeah. Right, we'll give it another 30 seconds and we'll crack on.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think I need to update my my photo. So it's
it's exactly the same.
We'll just screenshot you now.
Yeah,
I think it looks fun.
The white versus the black tea.
well, this is it. It's the different seasons of Evolve.
You're evolving.
Right, you ready, guys?
Let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
Wonderful. So, hello and welcome to this webinar, Call in the Cavalry, Turn Your Call Center Reps into Certified Closers. This call is for call center leaders, sales managers, business owners, and aspiring sales reps. Are you ready to elevate your sales team into a well-oiled machine with highly motivated and engaged sales reps? Perfect, because you're in the right place. My name is Bruce Bignell. I'll be hosting this conversation. I run Evolve, a technology consultancy based in the UK, working globally, that exists to enable businesses to do more with Pipedrive CRM. Now, we understand that call centers often face immense pressure and high turnover rates, especially with a growing young and diverse workforce. This is why we've gathered an incredible lineup of industry experts from SalesScreen and Engage Tech to share their insights and best practices on how to create an inspiring, supportive work environment. Our speakers include Remy Morkan, the Vice President of Sales at SalesScreen, the gamification platform that helps a client create the sales atmosphere of their dreams. Tom Watson, SDR Manager at Engage Tech, who works directly with clients and onboards new sales reps. And Georgia Kerwan, the Head of Sales Development at Engage Tech. And Engage Tech helps to drive pipeline generation and new business for organizations in the technology sector. So on this webinar, we're going to be aiming to talk strategically and practically to sales managers and sales leaders out there who have a growing Gen Z workforce in a call center environment. We're going to be touching topics like understanding the Gen Z sales workforce. Who are they? What do they do? What do they need? How to enhance employee engagement and motivation in a call center environment. tips on how to manage stress and boost team morale to drive pipeline goals and success, and how to leverage sales data-driven sales tech to drive employee engagement. Now, with that being said, I've uploaded a poll that will keep live throughout this conversation, asking, what tech do you use to manage your sales team? Spreadsheets, CRM, or CRM with additional third-party dashboards? So, without further ado, let's get started. A reminder, we are aiming to talk strategically and practically to sales managers and sales leaders here who have a growing Gen Z workforce. And when we talk about Gen Z in this conversation, we're talking about those entering the workforce who were born between 1997 and 2012. So, Georgia, Remy, how much of your workforce would you say is Gen Z currently?
It's a good question. We hire like quite a lot of graduates. So I'd say majority of our service delivery team, so all of our SDRs, will fall into that bracket, or the millennial. I think the biggest thing when it comes to Gen Z reps is that we need to understand like what gets them going and what motivates them from the get-go. I think giving them a really solid framework is key to basically help them identify the best ways that they can be successful. And ultimately, when it comes to Gen Z, a lot of them would have just come out of uni, or this may be their first adult job, as I like to call them. And ultimately, we need to help them, foster that discipline and drive and motivation. And I guess the way we can do that is by kind of honing down on those points. What about you, Remy?
So I've been in sales for very long. I know I look very young, but I've been in this game for almost 20 years. And I started at a call center. And when I started way back when, millennials was the new thing, right? Today, my team is about 15% is Gen Z. And so kind of what you're going through now is that you're starting out with a lot of new people that is now Gen Z. I did the same 15 years ago with millennials. So what I kind of see that the main difference, if it's new starters or if it's more advanced reps, Gen Z versus versus millennials, I think kind of the key for me is that Gen Z are way more kind of collaborative, way more in need of feedback. They are digitally native in a very different degree than millennials are. So kind of look at, it's the Instagram and Snapchat and Twitter and Facebook generation. The millennials were maybe the Facebook generation, but they were so much more in need of getting constant feedback. And that's something I had to mentally adapt to, especially in working with Gen Z versus millennials. That's been the really big thing for me personally.
So there's something here I just wrote there. What did a good manager from a millennial generation, what principles then has bled into the Gen Z generation? But I think what you said there is that the immediacy of feedback that we're now used to has changed, right? Yeah. So as leaders, how's that impacted how you and how have you struggled? What struggles are you feeling at the moment as you got this new workforce coming through that do need immediate feedback? How do you work with that?
I can give my and anything. It's feedback on everything, right? They're used to posting a picture on Instagram and then they get 100 likes, and that's feedback. So it's about catching people red-handed, doing a good job, and that could be the smallest things, right? You picked up the phone 50 times a day, you booked your 5th meeting of the month or whatever. So that's stuff you have to catch them doing. But it's also on the coaching part, just being able to go in and confirm that what they're doing is correct and then course direct, where I think as millennials, maybe they were more independent in that way. I don't know. What do you think, Georgia?
No, I definitely agree. A framework we use internally, a small part of that is praise in public and criticize in private. And what we really try to drive is praising the process, sort of similar to what you're saying, Rebby, is like praising the things that got them to the end result to make them realize that it's the process that we want to see, and it is the process that is going to get them to the next step in their career, or help them really double down on the sales skills that they need to, you know, become a top performer. And yeah, I think some of the struggles, it often comes down to a lack of communication, I'd say. As you said, Remy, they're used to consistent communication and feedback. So I'm sure that there's Gen Zers out there that are probably sitting there worried, like, oh my gosh, my manager hasn't spoke to me in a day or so. And it is sometimes just a quick message to be like, hey, what'd you have for lunch today? Or, you know, how did that call go? Would love to hear it. Send me the call recording. And it's just, they need to feel like you're interested in them as a person, but also in them and their career. And the way you can do that is through those frameworks and by praising the process versus the outcome.
Love it.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. And Tom, as some of the regularly trained sales reps and onboard them for your clients, is that a similar framework for you? And what struggles have you found that you don't mind sharing, that our listeners might be able to relate to there as you're taking them through their kind of sales onboarding process and then actually putting them into a live client?
Yeah, of course. I think there's like maybe two sections of the questions there. It's like training the sales reps, but then getting them in a position that they're ready to be onboarded to clients. I think definitely when I started the role, I overcomplicated it massively. I was trying to give so much feedback and it just wasn't going into some of the reps I was coaching. And I almost like dummy proofed myself. I just thought every time I'm going to give some feedback or do a training session, just keep it simple. 3 areas that they did really well, and then just 3 areas that they need to improve on. Just simplifying that meant they were coming away from sessions and just, it was very clear and simple on what they need to work on to get better. But then I'd also say, I think encouragement of failing, like motivating them that failure is almost like a good thing. So it's good to fail, but then it's so important that they're constantly learning from these mistakes. One thing that we like to do in Engage Tech is actually just partner them up with like other really successful SDRs. We call them buddies. So someone that's been doing the job for, I don't know, at least 6 months to a year. So they've got that kind of middle ground where maybe they're struggling with something. Maybe they're not too comfortable talking to their manager, or the manager's busy. They can go to this SDR that's just got that little bit more experience, maybe help them answer some of those questions. But then also encourage them to share their losses. So what I would like to do is actually just share some of my worst calls with some of the SDRs at the start and just be like, it's okay to do this. Like, it's going to happen on a daily basis, but then just talk about what we actually learned from it and how to improve. Go on.
I was going to say that's so, it's so good. It obviously ties back into what Georgia was saying with the process, trust the process, trust the process. Failure is part of the process, and you're moving towards something if that's that's how you frame it. But would you is obviously that's a framework that the Engage Tech is, that's coming from up top, right? So that's being pushed down to you guys, and then that filters down to the new reps.
Yeah, of course. Like we've all got managers on this call as well, and them encouraging us and showing them how they fail definitely creates that kind of upward chain of communication, or up and down, that it's a learning process, right? It's a curve that you need to go through that process to be able to learn from it and get better. So yeah, as long as it's done from the top down, it works quite well.
I can still remember my first ever cold call with my manager, Susie Jakes, at the time. I just hung up. She said, "What did you do?" There's a script, and I just hung up. Yeah, so there was no call.
We've all been there.
I think we all did that.
And yeah, notice I was hanging up the phone. I didn't have any of this technology back then.
No headsets back then.
No headsets. But so from Remy, from your side, what would you add to that in terms of? Yes, it's sharing your own losses, and there might be fewer and fewer as you get maybe further away from the actual selling yourself. but encouraging for that buddy system, is that something that you guys at SalesScreen have, or do you have another way of kind of sharing, not failures, but bad calls?
Yeah, no, but I it reminds me of kind of my principles when I started. We had one negative, one positive, and I think that's kind of back to the frequency of your coaching. So the more frequently you're coaching, the more direct feedback you can give, right? So if you can kind of, in a call center environment, you could have one coach sitting there the entire day, just listening and in on calls, and then pulling reps in and just giving instant feedback. Hey, look at this, and then monitor them for the next 10 calls to see if they're making the change. And that's kind of how you create new behavior. So one good thing, one bad thing. And if there's not any good things, you could always say you have a great phone voice, right? There's always a positive.
You can always find something, right? And just to be uber specific to those listeners here. So yes, that's the strategy of pulling someone in. Practically, what are you saying to that rep? Because you can't say, do you want them to be self-reflective?
Absolutely. You want to probably play the snippet. So say it's a 30-second, it's a 1-minute snippet, and ask them, like, what do you think? What would you have done differently? What was great about this section? And then discuss, get them to open up. And the more they can figure out themselves, the better it is, because then change probably is gonna stick, right? Instead of me just throwing scripts at people, that's not going to develop people. So that's kind of the balance, and kind of back to the buddy system. I totally love that. We don't have that exactly, but it has, like in any team, I've seen that the perfect manager to rep ratio is 8 reps per manager, something like that. After 8 reps per manager, performance declines, but still at 8 reps per manager, you have 8 one-on-ones per week. You have a million phone calls and 1,000 demos to review. So creating a buddy system or a peer-to-peer system where they're constantly developing each other. So we use Slack a lot. We use Chorus for call recordings so that we can review and develop as a team. We're not weaker. We're not better than our weakest link in that sense, right?
No, absolutely. There was something that you mentioned, George, a little bit earlier about the touch points, and a Gen Z might need to have a touch point daily or whatever that might be. How has that changed? And that kind of makes me think about Gen Z, their first adult job, and a remote first office or an office-based sales environment. Can we talk about that for the next couple of minutes? Like, what does that mean, and how do they differ from a buddying system if you're going to have it all in the office? Because I remember looking at the best people in the team when I was sitting there, aspiring to be them. How do they handle objections? How do they handle calls? What do they do after a call? How do we manage that afterwards? So if we can explore that, please. And start with you, Georgia.
Yeah, 100%. It's really topical, I think, because I think COVID has obviously put a lot of people working from home, but a lot of businesses have now transitioned to that hybrid work life, which would be super tough for newer sales reps who are trying to ramp up. And we're like an office first company, and that is purely because, the amount of immediate feedback you can get from sitting next to someone, or me sitting next to my team, and I can listen to their call. I'm like, why did you say that? Or what was the question? Like, why did you respond that? What were they saying? Not only that, it's they can be listening to those top performers and, oh, that was a lovely opening, or, oh, wow, what a good open question. That feedback feeds, and like, that's how kind of, I guess, people do progress. I think for companies, and we speak with companies that have SDR teams all the time, and it's really hard to have internal SDR teams. There is so much challenging around, that training and management piece. And all I'd say is, the tools that you mentioned, Romy, like your Slacks, we use a Lego and Aircall to listen back to calls. There was what was the tool we used, Tom, for sitting on calls and we jump on it all together?
Yeah, so we would get the calls to come through our headset, but then we would jump on maybe a Slack call or a Teams call and get that to come out of our laptop. So you're recreating the kind of environment that you'd have in the office, but from the luxury of your bedroom. So as soon as someone would pick up, you'd put your laptop on mute so they couldn't hear loads of, like 5 people chatting away, but everyone else could hear your call, and you'd be getting live feedback exactly on, oh, that's a really good question. Maybe be getting shout outs into the general of Tom just reclosed in a really good way, etc. And that would motivate those sitting in their bedrooms to be just a bit more engaged and, you know, hunt down that conversation so that they can get a shout out as well.
Well, it's engaged, and the touch point of like feeling that you're part of a team when you're so next to each other, and that your involvement is being impacted. You are doing this together, right? That there's like you mentioned earlier, George, I think it was yourself that said about just, you need to care about my career, and like it's if you're just sitting in a room making calls, being told no 9 times out of 10 on your own, it's a very lonely existence, right?
Well, yeah.
So maybe Remy or Tom, you can talk to this then. So what would you do if your team are stressed, unmotivated, and behind their pipeline goals, whether they're in the office or remotely? How do you think about that?
I can start her. I think it's naturally a lot easier to manage somebody in an office, right? Because you have 8-9 hours a day together with somebody, and you can, even if you didn't mean to, you can listen in on a call while you're walking past them, and you learn how they use your messaging, how they communicate, if they talk too fast, too slow, all kind of the small details. And being in sales it's the most difficult thing in the world, right? Because you're being measured on absolutely everything, like words per minute. Which other profession are you measured on words per minute, for example, and talk time and so on? and I think kind of what we have to look at, going back from Gen Z and millennials and everything, and in a call center environment, we have to look at our people, right? And then we have to look at the team and who are they and how are these people motivated? And we know that in your team, you're going to have 10% of your team, they're going to be killers. They're going to be top motivated rep. That's always going to drive to be something. They're going to be a CEO or see something sometime in life. And a lot of these people, they start in sales, right? And then you have another 10, 20% who are driven in other ways. And then you have a big bunch of people that has just dropped into sales, as most people do with sales, especially in Europe. And you need to find some purpose, right? So when they're unmotivated, when things are difficult, we have to bring it up and look at what are we trying to achieve by being where we are today, and create a development plan and train them and just break things down, get it to the level where they know that, okay, for me to get to where I want to be the VP of marketing at a software company in 10 years or whatever that goal is, right? Break it down. I need to start picking up the phone. I need to see success. I need to speak to customers. I need to understand people's pain. And to get there, that means I need to get down to 50 conversations a day, 2-hour talk time, a meeting a day. Like, break it down for them, but connect it to something bigger so that they know what they're working towards. Because if there's no purpose in the end, they're just feeding the capitalist beast, which is the organization they're working for, right? So, and that works for some kind of the really money-driven people, but most people aren't.
Yeah, and I think that's quite. I mean, you mentioned the 10% will look after themselves. They're the top performers. What I find quite interesting here, if we've got sales managers listening to this, how do you raise the level of the individual contributors? There'll be 10% that do churn, right? And so it's not right for them. But how do you, that large lumpy middle, how do you level up everyone? I just want to touch upon what you said. So understanding kind of intrinsic motivations, or what beyond maybe sales goals. So you might have a framework for that, and obviously it sounds like the Engage Tech team have something there. So I don't know if you can share that. But are you also saying, Remy, you should be doing this as a sales manager per rep, having their individual intrinsic needs, what's motivating that person?
Especially for Gen Z, right? For a millennial, you could group them and say, hey guys, do this. Or for a baby boomer who was motivated in different ways, work was work, right? But for Gen Zs, it has to be it means a lot more. They need to know that they're working for something and it's connected to a higher purpose. So definitely have individual conversation and try to understand who your employee is. And leadership is servantship, right? So you need to be a servant to their needs. So how can you cater to get that person to 100% motivation, to get that person to 100% understanding of what they want, right? Because that's it for me, at least.
I see the two of you nodding there. What would you add to that, or where would you go from there?
Someone jump in.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Like, I couldn't agree more in terms of just breaking it down into the individual metrics, how they add up to the bigger picture. One of our sessions in our onboarding plan, so in their first 3 months, is we actually just structure their day. And typically the first thing I'll ask is, what is our job? What is our main goal? And everyone says, oh, to book that meeting, book one meeting. And I think we obviously reflect. It's like, if we're coming away every day thinking, is today a successful day if I booked a meeting? In your first 3 months, you're probably going to have quite a few unsuccessful days because you're not going to be booking as many meetings. So we just break it down into each hour of the day. Is it I set myself a target of 3 accounts, 30 contacts in this hour. I do that. Next hour, I do the same thing, certain different prospects, engage, chase pipeline, whatever it is. And then we reflect on the day and it's cool. I achieved that. That's a good day. And it adds up to the bigger picture. So it's making them just realize all these small, different, tangible actions that you can do in the day will eventually get you to that end goal. We break it down a lot into that. And I think competition as well, I think is an important factor. We're all salespeople. Like, I think we're all quite competitive, quite a few into sports, and it's just driving each other to get the best out of each other, creating internal competition. Is it, you split up your team, you said 8 reps is best to have in a team. You just split them 4, some kind of incentive at the end, and they go at it. You'll see some good results for sure.
Yeah, and I can actually confirm that we do a lot of competitions at SalesScreen, and our customers, they complete about 20,000 competitions every year. And what we see, what the data tells us is that keep it short. Like a 4-hour competition is 10 times more effective than a 40-day competition. Keep it tight. And definitely what Tom is kind of going into here on team against team. And this is in sales, the best performers, they get promoted to leaders. And I'm gonna assume that Tom and Georgia, you were top performers when you were reps, right? That's just how it is in sales. The best performers, they get promoted to become leaders, and then they apply motivational tactics that motivates top performers. And usually that is who can call the most, who can book the most, who can sell the most. And the same people win every time these competitions, right? So what you want to do is you want to do exactly what Tom said there. You have a team of 8, break it up in 2 so that there's one top performer on each team and they can pull the rest of the team. Because in the end, again, to what Tom said, it's about feeling mastery. And mastery isn't necessarily booking a meeting or closing a deal. Mastery is checking some boxes. I have had good conversations. I've picked up the phone 50 times and I had 2-hour talk time. As long as I do that, we can work on quality and tweak the conversations to get them to book meetings. But without the quantitative measurements to start with, there's no chance to be successful. So if you're gonna train your team to focus on core activities, quality is gonna come and meetings are gonna come, right?
Yeah, that's so important. It's obviously, it very much sounds like disengaging the outcome from the process, which and that would really help if they're not seeing immediate improvement, whether you're onboarding them or if that would really help there. Georgia, how would you think about, again, I want to get super kind of practical here. How do you think about driving employee engagement and motivation in a call center environment when it's what we just said there, that process, when it gets very, very repetitive and they can get discouraged, whether they're working in this team, they're just not, you got the guys that are killing it, the guys and girls that are killing it, how do you level up or drive employee engagement for those that it's just not really working for them?
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good question. I think and I started like peak COVID, and I remember being at home in my flat. My flatmates were like, "Who is she talking to all day?"
Yeah.
And yeah, it was tough. It was tough. There were definitely lows, but I think some of the best highs and some of the best highs that we've had, either in the office or when we run like an online incentive, is when we try and get everyone involved. We'll do silly things like guess the fridge, and you have to take a photo of your fridge, and you get to nominate someone if you booked a meeting. Or we will do a reschedule power hour where everyone in the company is on the phones getting as many reschedules in as possible, and the person who gets the most in that time period gets a prize. We'll run delivery days where we will have different awards for highest calls, highest talk time, highest accounts penetrated into, the funniest opener, and we'll be putting these little short clips and snippets of these calls into our Slack. And I think that just is making this job, which sometimes can be really repetitive and tough at the end of the day, a little bit more fun. And especially in when we're speaking about Gen Z, they need that fun. They need to know, as Romy said, that they've got a purpose and they're working towards something. So if they're a part of a company that is, they can see that the company is trying to make an effort to make their working lives a little bit better and motivate them to do that, I think that also adds to their personal motivation as well.
Mm. What would you add to that, Tom? Obviously, I keep leaning in my head. I'm leaning at you, Tom, because you're going to have probably the most closer to the ground in terms of the immediacy of the feedback with a lot of these reps that are just starting. And if we're talking to sales managers here that have got new reps that are coming through their first adult job, can you employ those types of tactics at that early stage, or is it getting them they're in this together, remove themselves from that environment, and then go again in an hour? How do you approach that?
So definitely agree with a lot of sentiments George has said, that you've got to keep it fun, you've got to keep it engaging. I think definitely what motivates a lot of people is just getting that immediate feedback. So I just had to, a bit like what we said about just staying on a Teams call, getting that direct feedback instantly of this is what you didn't do well, this is probably what would work, rather than sending a call to your manager, oh, I'll listen to it in 2 days, and then you get the feedback. You kind of just forget about what has actually happened in that call, and it really loses that kind of impact and doesn't really make it as motivating to continue doing the job. We spoke on just then about keeping it fun, incentivizing, and I think what's also important is actually just changing up your environment, just changing scenery. This morning, actually, our Wi-Fi had gone down, and about half the company went over the roads to work in the hotel that we regularly use, and it's just mixing up that environment. 5 people huddled around a coffee table, just standing, pitching. It just keeps it fresh and engaging. So just doing things like that, just taking people out of their comfort zone. If they're working from home, if it's a working from home environment 24/7, can you get all the reps to go to their local coffee shop and replicate that as well? So just keeping it fresh, engaging, motivating them on the bigger picture, would be my advice.
Mm. So that's really good for you guys. So what's coming out is obviously trust the process, these frameworks in personal and very specific incentives for each individual rep, understanding their key motivations. Would you say that Gen Z prefer or expect to have reports to be managed with data and dashboards? Is that something that you can't just sit them down once a quarter and say, oh, let's have our review now? Obviously, we've mentioned this immediate feedback, but how do you give that? Is it Slack? Is it a dashboard that you can share with them? How do you see that?
For us, it's actually we deliver visualization and gamification. So it's all about real-time data, and it's about giving them the ability to review their own data and to benchmark themselves against everybody else at any given time, right? As we touched upon this earlier, but you have your buddy system. So we have to give them the ability to develop themselves in their own time, in their own way, right? And some people, they're going to want to go to their manager and get feedback all the time. And then you have some people that want to break out, they want to explore, they want to find their path through talking to their peers. So giving them access to data, to dashboards, to call logs, to whatever, we're catering to all the different personality types in your team. So it's about giving them that possibility. And like the old-fashioned way of having a dashboard that's updated once a day by your manager and then going to the board and looking at who performed the best, the same people are going to be on the top of the leaderboard at any given time, right? So it's about giving them the possibility to do something with the data. And then, as Tom and George has been into, it's about what is good behavior. It's not necessarily about the meeting, but who unlocked the 50 dials today badge, or did the 2-hour talk time, who's streaking on that badge and who's consistently delivering on the core activities that everybody can do. That's solely about motivation. It doesn't matter if you've been in the game for 10 years or 10 days, everybody can pick up the phone 50 times a day, right? But if you do that consistently 365 days a year or 244 days a year, you're going to develop and you're going to get to the place where they are. And if we can kind of train that and give them access to that piece of information, real time, cross-platform, any device, they're going to develop. And then they're going to be better a lot faster. And that's what we want in the end, right?
Have either of you, I'll go to you, Georgia. What are some of your favorite dashboards that you like to use, I guess, personally, for your reps and for individuals? What are some of the favorite dashboards that you like to share there?
Yeah, it's a good question and a bit of a plug here. I actually used SalesScreen when we did a Battle of the Phones competition last year, and yeah, to be honest, never used it before, and it was fun. It had the little boats going along when everyone booked a meeting, and it did just make it really engaging. And as Tom said, like, a lot of people in sales are extremely competitive. So when I'm seeing this little boat move from the other team, I'm like, hell no, they are not winning today. So yeah, I think real time is super, super important. We do like a lot of our dashboards that focus on, yeah, who had the most conversations, the amount of prospects or accounts that have been penetrated or added into sequence. And I think it is giving people access to the information that they need to succeed. And, you know, to almost, if you broke down the job into little tiny bits, these are the main areas that you need to be focusing on every day. And if your reps are seeing that, not only do you have that visibility as a manager and that responsibility to keep checking in and understanding trends, and you know that's a bit odd. Why is it one section like this, as an example? But it also gives them the ability to compare themselves against themselves, but also compare themselves against others and see how they can see an uptick in certain areas as well.
And Tom, do you have any stories where you've seen or favorite dashboards and stories that you would like to share where you've seen, to George's point, that boat, I'm not going to let that boat win. Have you got any stories like that where you've seen a dashboard used in quite a nice way?
There's dashboards for everything, like calls, conversations, calls over a minute. One thing that I like to do is encourage my reps to like alternatively source numbers. So certain prospects, can't get hold of them, what different methods can you use to try and generate a number? And there's dashboards that we can use in Salesforce where I'll create a alternative sourcing power. They can source numbers, put them into CRM, and you can see how many people are actually getting numbers within that hour. Now, again, this doesn't generate us results there and then within that hour, But what you do then find is they will see the success from getting those numbers 2-3 weeks later when those prospects are actually picking up the phone, and then they realize the processes needed to go into that. And then it encourages them. It basically means I don't need to create a power hour for them to do that. They realize I can do this myself. I don't need a CRM to be able to put them in. And it almost creates that self-motivation to be able to go out and hunt down numbers, hunt down conversations themselves.
I think that's really important, because obviously we've spoke here a lot about the kind of the outreach, the contacts out, whereas actually part of sales is you haven't always got, this might be a piece that Gen Zs have, right? So they expect to have the data there ready for them. They've got incredible amount of technology that can plug into these. So when they have their dialing power hour, it's just there for them. But there's a bit of prospecting. So what your that dashboard and that muscle that you're encouraging there is actually, how can we find other ways of contacting them, not just from what our CRM is telling us is their email or their phone number. So that's a really nice muscle to kind of, certainly at the stage when you're getting them, because it might be quite fresh, first or second job out of university or straight from school. So yeah, that's a really nice dashboard there. Would you add any favorite dashboards, Remy, that you'd like to share?
I have 100 dashboards. I'm a data-driven dude, so I'm gonna want to look into everything, right? But for an end user, the most important thing for them is to understand their funnel, right? And every organization has a funnel, and usually in a software perspective, it starts with adding a prospective sequence, and then it's usually how many personalized activities do I do per sequence? So how many calls, LinkedIn connects, LinkedIn messages, videos do I create? And then call time, how many of those ends up in a meeting and how many of those ends up as an opportunity and how many of those ends up as close won and revenue and their conversion rates. The most important thing is that we give them an overview of what they're doing from start to end, and then we can give them insights on here's room for improvement. Here's where you're good, here's where you're weaker than the benchmark, so that they can themselves go back and say, hey, I want training here, right? So having that available creates solid reps.
Well, I'm just conscious of time now, so I'm going to say thank you for that, guys. I'm going to see if we've got any questions that are going to come through. If we can share my screen there. Can you see the screen? Oh, thumbs up, that's good. So yeah, we'll see if anyone puts any questions in there. I do have something for you in case nothing comes through, but we'll leave that for a couple of moments. From my side, what tips would you say for retaining again, talking to sales managers, what tips would you say for retaining top talent when budgets are tight, right? Because a lot of these things here we spoke about today involves time and maybe some other technology. What would you recommend for managers if they want to retain top talent when budgets are tight?
Everything can be done manually, like Tom was into, right? It's about like creating competition is the easiest thing, and it's a million different ways to do it. You can create your own wheel of fortune, or you can, every time you have a call over 3 minutes, you put your name on a piece of paper and then you put it in a bowl and then you pull something out. Like, just be creative, do stuff, engage your team, right? Because everybody all over is in a tough situation, especially in the software sector right now, right? And it's not because your product is bad or your manager is bad. It's because there's scrutiny now. People are way more aware before going into meetings and before buying technologies. So break it up, make it fun, and you don't need money to have fun. You can have a lot of fun without money, actually.
We got a question here. How would you all recommend going about pitching these helpful add-ons to the tech stack to leadership with the budgets we are dealing with? So this is actually building off of what we just said. You want to get buy-in, you know it can work. How has anyone got any good stories where they've pitched something up the ladder and had it taken on board? That's a great question.
Currently doing this as we speak, to be honest. I think it's really important to do your market research, like show the people higher up that you have looked at other tools that have similar capabilities, so that you know that for like 100% this is the tool that you want. Understand obviously the positives and how they're going to impact not only your workflow, but how it can impact the wider business or different teams. But also, like, you have to highlight the drawbacks. There's going to be a drawback with every tool, and I think it's better to make them super clear. But also make sure you are saying, because of this drawback, these are the steps that I'm going to take to avoid this kind of having an impact on me or my team. Yes, that would be my top 3. Look at alternatives. Yeah, look at alternatives, put a business case in. And yeah, as Remy said, you can always go manual for a little bit, but continue to put that business case in.
Yeah, it's such a good point. People they rush to automate when you can. If you can do it in pen and paper, people have doing it for years, right? So you can do that first, prove the case, and then go up team management.
I think I was just going to add on to that. I think it's important to remind yourself on who you're pitching up to. Whoever you're pitching is going to be someone who's done a sales job or done the SDR job back when they started, and almost just reminding them of their times as being an SDR, what their struggles was, and just showing them maybe the journey or how the game has changed a little bit and why these tools are actually important. So like almost getting them to put themselves in the SDR shoes and how the tool will benefit them.
And if you're pitching even further up, if you're pitching to the CFO or the CEO who necessarily hasn't been in that position, make sure that whatever you're pitching is connected to a strategic initiative, right? Any organization, they have an OKR or a goal, or they have something that they're trying to achieve. Make sure that the tool or whatever objective you're trying to get them to spend money on is connected to that. This is going to help us improve OKR XYZ, right? And then last but not least, nobody spends money for fun things. You have to prove ROI, right? You have to say, by applying this technology, we are going to see an uplift in X, Y, and Z, right? And be able to sell that, because in the end, that's when you can free money, if that can access more money, right?
Right. No, well, thank you for that. I think that's a really good point. I guess pitching up to either your sales manager that does know the role, or up again to really prove the case across the business. Right then, so before we wrap up, I know we're slightly going over here. Before we wrap up, let's take a look at some of the answers on the poll. Bear with me. There we go. So what do we have here? We've got 9% on spreadsheets still, 68% on the CRM, 33% on CRM with additional third-party dashboards. So it seems that we have a lot of pretty tech-savvy people that joined us today. And obviously we'll share this afterwards as well. So I just want to say thank you. This has been a really insightful conversation for me, guys. Speaking with the expert speakers here, Remy from SalesScreen, Georgia and Tom from Engage Tech. And I just want to say thank you to Jen from SalesScreen and Marco from Evolve for helping to put this together. I hope you found it useful. We'll be sure to send you a recording of this in case you missed the beginning. I've been Bruce Bignell. I only run Evolve, a technology consultancy that exists to help businesses do more with Pipedrive. We'll also have links to Engage Tech and SalesScreen team in the email that follows this. Once again, thank you very much. Cheers, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Have a good one.
Bye now.
Thanks.